The sun dipped low across the plains, staining the sky in bruised shades of copper and violet, as if the earth itself had been wounded by the day. Along the dirt road that threaded its way into Dry Creek, a woman walked alone. She walked as though she had been walking for miles, because she had, but there was something unbroken in the way her shoulders squared against the wind, something taut and quietly defiant in the rhythm of her step. Clara Ray was not young, nor did she pretend to be. Time had drawn fine lines beside her eyes, gentled her beauty into something quieter, like a song remembered rather than sung. Her dress was plain, travel-worn and dusty, and she wore a coat too thin for season, patched at the elbows with careful stitches. Her boots had split at the toes days ago. She'd bound them with twine. Still, she carried herself as if she wore velvet. It was the only pride she had left. Dry Creek was a town stitched together from saloons, barns, and prayer. It sat like a half-finished thought beneath the open sky. She entered it without ceremony, her presence stirring little more than passing glances, most of them dismissive, a few curious, one or two vaguely cruel. It didn't matter. She had not come to be liked. She had come because there was nowhere left to go. The schoolhouse had closed its doors to her weeks ago in the last town, after someone whispered too loud and too often that the child she'd once taken in, sickly, brown-eyed, and half-Cherokee, might have been her own. No proof was needed. In towns like that, rumor cut sharper than truth, and Clara's quietness was the kindling. When the mother died, the boy had nowhere to go, and Clara did what no one else would. She took him in. That mercy cost her everything. Now her pockets were empty, her name sullied, her pride tattered but intact. She stood before the livery first, asking after work, mucking stalls, cleaning tack, anything. The man inside barely glanced up. "Plenty of young girls need coin," he muttered. "Not much call for one's past bloom." Clara said nothing. She left before his gaze could land on her like a blow. Outside the mercantile, a notice was nailed to the door. Help wanted, cook or housekeeper. Wages fair. Inquire with Mr. Lyle. Clara traced the name with her eyes before walking the 2 blocks to a whitewashed house with green shutters, the finest in town. She knocked once, hands trembling not with fear, but weariness. The man who answered was lean and sharp-faced, his coat pressed, his boots clean. He looked at her as one might look at a stain. "I'm here about the position," Clara said. He took her in from head to toe. "How old are you?" 38. "You look older." He leaned against the doorframe. "Been married?" "No." "Children?" "No." "Why were you looking for work?" She hesitated. "I taught school. That ended." He sniffed. Too old to be wanted, not old enough to be pitied. Then, with a smile so small it barely lifted one side of his face, "You can sleep in the shed out back. Cook for me and clean the floors. First month's unpaid. Consider a trial." Clara stood a long moment in the doorway. Behind her, the wind shifted and a curl of dust blew past. She looked over his shoulder at the home's polished wood floors, the gleaming banister, the books lined up neat on the parlor shelf. She imagined herself mopping them in silence, waiting on a man who looked through her instead of at her. "I'm not a servant," she said softly. He laughed. "You're a woman with no prospects and no youth. You're whatever someone says you are." Clara turned, walked away. She didn't run. She didn't cry. That night, she found a bench near the chapel. The pastor had long since shuttered the doors for the evening, but the alcove was dry and shielded from the wind. She sat there with her satchel at her feet and her hands folded in her lap. For supper, she had a piece of hard biscuit from 2 days ago, wrapped in linen. She didn't eat it. The stars came out like small mercies. She leaned her head back against the wood and closed her eyes. She did not sleep, not quite. She floated in that strange in-between where thoughts soften, but the heart keeps watch. Sometime near dawn, a quiet shuffling stirred her. She opened her eyes to see a boy, maybe 10, maybe younger, setting something beside her, a biscuit warm and thick with honey. He didn't speak, only looked at her with solemn eyes. She nodded once, gently. "You tell your mama I'm grateful," she said. "Ain't got one," he replied. "It's for me." Then he disappeared back into the dark, like a bird startled from the brush. Clara held the biscuit in her hand for a long while before she ate it. When she did, she closed her eyes again, not from sleepiness, but something like prayer. The next morning, as light slanted pale across the town, she rose and walked toward the edge of Dry Creek. The wind had picked up, sharp with the breath of early frost. Her fingers ached from the cold. Her pride was sore like a bruised muscle. Still, she moved forward. Near the chapel's garden, a wagon stood, broad-wheeled, the kind used to haul feed or timber. The man beside it was loading bags of oats, moving slowly, with a limp in his right leg that made each step careful. He looked up when she passed. She might not have noticed him, might have kept walking, but there was something still in his gaze, like water that ran deep but didn't rush. His face was lined, not with age, but sun and silence. A long scar curved from beneath his collar up behind his left ear, the sort that said nothing easily but carried everything. He tipped his hat. She nodded. When she dropped the kerchief from her satchel, the one her mother had embroidered years ago with thread faded to soft pink, he bent slowly to pick it up. His hand brushed the dirt from it with care before holding it out. "You traveling far?" he asked. "I don't know." He looked at the sky. Storm coming in by nightfall. Wind smells like snow. "I'll manage." "You shouldn't have to." He paused. "I've got a bunkhouse. Empty but dry. Stove still works. You'd have privacy. Work if you want it. If not, there's a porch and a view." Clara searched his face for any sign of what he wanted from her, what he saw in her. There was no hunger in his gaze, no judgment, just a quiet offer, given and not pushed. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" she asked. He shrugged. "You look like someone who's walked a long way." "I have." "You don't look like someone who should keep walking." Clara stood very still. A wagon wheel creaked. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. She felt the ache in her feet, the throb in her knees, the bitter gnaw of loneliness wrapped up tight in the pit of her chest. But she also felt something she had not felt in months. Choice. She glanced down at the kerchief in her hand, then nodded. "I'll ride with you," she said. He didn't smile, not exactly, but something eased in his shoulders. He helped her into the wagon with a quiet grace, as if he was offering his hand not out of duty but respect. They traveled east, away from Dry Creek, down a trail that curved through hills and fields gone golden with early autumn. He spoke little. She did not feel the silence. But as they rode, the sky opened above them like a sigh, and Clara let herself breathe in it. His ranch lay tucked in a hollow, beneath a stand of old cottonwoods. The house stood simple and wide-porched, a barn to one side, a smokehouse to the other. Beyond it, the land rolled out in soft folds, touched with amber grass and broken fences. The bunkhouse he'd offered was small, its wood weathered, but the roof was sound. He opened the door for her, stepped back. "You can rest. I'll bring firewood." "Your name?" she asked. "Silas Dorn." She stepped inside. The air smelled of pine dust and old paper. A stove sat in the corner, rusted but intact. A cot, a shelf, a window that looked out over a stretch of quiet land. She closed the door behind her, leaned against it. For the first time in months, she felt the absence of eyes on her, of whispering mouths, of judgment. She did not cry, but she allowed herself to sit down, hands in her lap, and stare at the window until the light faded. Outside, Silas set a stack of firewood gently by the door. Then he walked away without a word. Clara watched the silhouette move across the yard, slow and sure. And for the first time since she left the schoolhouse behind, she whispered aloud into the quiet. Maybe. Not yes. Not hope. But maybe. And that was enough to sleep. The bunkhouse breathed in the cold and exhaled warmth, a softness Clara had not expected. She woke slowly that first morning, unsure if it was real. This bed beneath her, this hush of safety wrapped around her like wool. For a long moment she listened. The call of birds in the cottonwoods, the low creak of the windmill turning steady in the wind, the clink of a pail against a trough. She sat up, touched the edge of the blanket, and stared at the sunlight trickling through the single pane of glass like honey. Outside, the world moved in simple rhythm. Silas was already at the barn, feeding the stock with slow, practiced motions. He worked like a man who'd done every chore 1,000 times and still approached them without hurry. Clara watched him from the porch, a cup of water in her hand, steam curling faintly off the surface. He didn't speak when he saw her, just gave a small nod, the kind that said, "I see you. I'm glad you stayed." She began helping the way women do, not by being asked, but by noticing what needed doing. The bunkhouse, though solid, had long been left with mice and dust. She swept the floors, mended the curtains, lined the shelf with dried sage she found near the fence line. She boiled water, scrubbed the stove until it glinted like coal, lit the lanterns at dusk. Silas let her be. He didn't hover or direct, but now and then she'd find things set out for her, a coil of new twine, a box of matches, a jar of nails. Once, a small square of lavender soap, its wrapper faded, folded neatly. She never saw him leave them, but they were there all the same, like quiet offerings. He kept mostly to himself, but in the evenings he sat out on the porch with his pipe, and she found herself drifting there too, not always talking but present. One night, as the stars pricked through the velvet sky, he said, "This land used to belong to my brother. He left it to me after the fever took his wife and girls." Clara looked up. "I'm sorry." He nodded. It was a long time ago. Still echoes sometimes. After that, the silences between them felt different. Not empty, just shared. Autumn unfurled slowly, each day shedding color like leaves. Clara began walking the fence line, checking for breaks, bringing back kindling or branches felled by wind. Silas showed her how to patch a loose rail, how to test a gate for strength. He didn't talk much, but his instructions were clear, respectful. He never spoke down to her. Sometimes they laughed, softly, carefully, as if remembering how. Once, she burned the cornbread. He ate it anyway, chewing with exaggerated patience until she rolled her eyes and smacked his arm with a dish towel. Another time, he tried to patch a leak in the barn roof and slipped, landing flat in the hay. She found him grumbling, the brim of his hat bent, and laughed until her ribs ached. He watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, not with hunger, with something gentler. Curiosity, maybe, or wonder, like a man seeing spring after long frost. And she watched him too, the way he moved slower in the mornings, favoring his right leg, the way he touched the horses, slow, deliberate, with the reverence of someone who understood what it meant to earn trust. She didn't ask about the scar. He didn't ask why she had nowhere else. But the silence between them began to fill with things unsaid, things that warmed the air, softened the edges of their movements, made each shared task feel like more than labor. One afternoon, she sat mending a torn sleeve on the porch while Silas fixed a broken harness nearby. A trader passed on horseback, tipping his hat as he slowed. "You're the schoolteacher, ain't you?" he called out. Clara looked up, startled. He smiled thin. "Heard about you down in Grafton. Said you took in a half-breed boy. Thought he was yours." Silas stood slowly, not saying a word. The trader chuckled. "Town don't forget stories like that. Folks talk." He rode on, Clara's hand stilled on the cloth. The world narrowed. She felt it return, the sting of judgment, the weight of shame not earned but carried all the same. She rose, heart pounding, and walked back inside the bunkhouse. She packed in silence. Her hands shook, not with fear, with certainty. It would happen again. It always did. She slung her satchel over her shoulder as Silas knocked on the open door. "You leaving?" Her voice broke. "I won't ruin your name." He stepped in, slow. "You think I care about names?" She swallowed hard. It always follows. That boy needed someone. And I was someone. But they didn't care. They never do. Silas didn't argue. He just looked at her, steady. "I know what it's like to be lied about," he said. "I got that scar fighting in a war no one asked me to join. They said I deserted. Truth is, I was shot carrying my captain's body back to camp." Clara blinked. He stepped closer. "I didn't tell you that so you'd stay out of pity. I told you so you'd know I don't believe what people say just because they say it loud." Her shoulders trembled. She couldn't speak. "I want you here," he said. "Not for chores. Not for debt. Just here." She sat down, slowly, as if her knees gave way under the weight of what he offered. He didn't touch her, just sat across from her, their knees a breath apart, their silence fuller than speech. That night, she placed her mother's embroidered kerchief on the shelf by the bunkhouse window. Not tucked away, not hidden, just placed, visible. Silas passed by the window that morning, saw it there. He didn't say anything, but he looked in at her and gave her that same small nod. Later that week, the boy from the chapel, Eli, came to visit. He brought her a pine cone dusted in sap. Found it near the creek, he said. Thought it looked like a crown. She smiled, eyes watering. Thank you. He looked at her. You smile different now. She held the pine cone carefully. Maybe I do. He left it with her. She placed it on the windowsill. The world did not change overnight. There were still hard days, cold winds, nights where old ghosts whispered, but there was firewood by the door, a porch that never stayed dark, a name spoken gently, like it mattered. Clara had traded her pride for shelter. What she found was something far rarer, a place that did not ask her to explain herself, a man who saw her as she was and never looked away, and a house, small, quiet, patient, that felt at last like it knew her name. If you felt the warmth in this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another tale from the Wild West. Ask ChatGPT.